Hello and welcome to episode number 13 of Overheard Orlando. Today I'll be talking to my friend Paulaidan, a mad hatter of sorts who's going to be taking us down the rabbit hole of absurdity, symbolism, and of course, llamas. You certainly don't want to miss this. So I guess the place to start would be, I've noticed that a lot of people who aren't even friends with you or know you, I've seen them post pictures of this taxi that you did the artwork for, and it's kind of like a little bit of a moving monument. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that's the Mears taxi cab. I painted it in October of last year during the Immerse Festival in downtown Orlando, which is all about immersive art experiences, art installations in the streets. There were murals done on like mobile platforms in the streets as well, and a stage where performers were doing all sorts of interpretive dances and crazy stuff. It was a pretty amazing festival, and they reached out to me, and they had been recommended by another fantastic artist, Akiros. If you don't know him, he's an Orlando staple, AkYros, and he's also known for his print parties. He does print parties all over, but he was working with Immerse, and they asked him if he knew somebody that would be interested in painting a car, and he recommended me. And so it really was just like the most wonderful opportunity to ever fall in my lap ever. And I spent about a month working on that. One of my friends actually came in the 3 days preceding the festival and helped me get some of the greens done, because I had to have a certain portion of it finished before the festival, because obviously I couldn't paint a whole car start to finish during a 2-day festival. So I had it set and semi-complete so that I could finish painting it during Immerse. And I did that despite many bouts of rain.
And I'm not kidding. A lot of people post that. They'll see it driving. They will risk life and limb to get a picture or video of it, because it's.
So if any of you out there see my taxi in traffic and do manage to nab a picture safely, preferably, I would love to see you guys tag me in it. It really brings me a lot of joy seeing pictures of it out there in traffic, especially since I've only seen it once in traffic myself since I made it. So I'm actually working on a highlight reel on my Instagram. So for everyone that tags me in it, I repost it. So then it's in my history. So then I'm going to look through my whole history when it's like a year from when I made it. I made a little highlight reel of all the snapshots and put it on my profile. I don't know if that really benefits you guys, but I think it's pretty cool. And I would love it if you wanted to help me with that project.
It just makes people happy. Seeing the car on the road just makes people happy, and it is out there even as we speak. But I did want to touch on something. You mentioned the Immerse Festival. You mentioned like print parties and stuff. All things that have been canceled, if not drastically changed with everything going on. What kind of troubles have you discovered in this brave new world?
Well, we all hoped it wouldn't be going on for as long as it has. But I personally had 2 potential big shows that I had produced work specifically for coming up that were amidst the first quarantine when the dates came about. So naturally they've been postponed. One of them's in February and the other one uncertain. But yeah, the art scene is really, it's really struggling. We already had a lot of issues. There are very nebulous laws in downtown about whether or not we're allowed to perform, and what are the rules about you're not allowed to technically sell your work on the street, but you can accept a donation. It's like it's not easy to it wasn't easy to be an artist that goes out and does live things in Orlando before COVID, but now it's just damn near impossible.
But even attending the events that are going on or supporting the businesses that are still open, it carries a certain level of guilt these days. It's just like, am I part of the problem? Should I even be out here? You know, it puts you in a weird catch 22 because you want to do these things, but like, should you? But it's open, but should it be? And it's just, I get why a lot of people are opting to stay home. I'm trying to create kind of a happy medium where I stay home more than I used to, but I still go out for the big stuff.
You know, I really, me and my housemates really worked hard to self quarantine during the first 3 months of this whole thing. You know, we hung out with very, very limited people that we knew that were also self quarantined. So we had like a quarantine family, like an extended family of a few friends. Like we each had like one or two people that would be able to come over to our house, and everybody else was kind of like, I'll talk to you on Instant Messenger. We'll play some video games together or something. But you know, it was now that Florida's reopened, I want to go back out, but I don't know. It just feels like a huge "I told you so" moment for me personally, because I was like posting memes about the second wave of COVID, and they were talking about reopening, and I mean, people thought they were memes.
I don't want to make this interview about COVID or anything, but I will say it's a little unusual that when we were closed, everything was accelerating at a much slower rate as opposed to now. But I guess at this point, it's kind of like one of those the damage is done things. I really don't know.
Well, it's so easy to go down the COVID rabbit hole because it's been our whole existence this past 3.5, 4 months. I mean, like, even for us who we're not as well informed and only found out about it in March, it's still been since March, which is what that's month number 3, right? It's
Yeah.
number 7. We're 4 months in. It's impossible to not think about, and it's all of us are just trying to do our best and try to imagine a future where this doesn't end in some weird, darker, Black Mirror-esque scenario.
I was curious, how have you adapted both as an artist? Because I think that's one of the more interesting things. A lot of people, 2 weeks ago, I had someone who created an online zine. Last week, I had an artist who is really leaning into social media. What have you done as an artist to kind of adapt to this very different landscape?
So, I mean, the funny thing about this whole different landscape is that I realized when quarantine started that that I had already essentially been in quarantine. I was just leaving the house to go to my part-time job, coming back, working on art, watching whatever on the TV, working on art, going to sleep, getting up, and either working on art or going to that job. You know, it was like I wasn't going out to do things, and now I miss all the things that I used to do back before I started doing this to myself. But like the realization was there. It was like I had been avoiding everything, and now I can't do it, and now it's like, oh, I took it for granted. Oh, so I've never been a big fan of social media, but I understand it's like, air quotes, a necessary evil in this day and age as a creative individual, whatever you create. That said, I still struggle motivating to work on it in a meaningful way. So I've been adapting in a different way, whereas I've been trying to invest my time in different alliances with other creative people and doing collaborative work. Like there's a poetry book I have coming up, TBD. We were actually about to produce the first run of them, and then the factory closed due to I will leave it an unnamed pandemic. But so I actually spent most of this year not showing in as many galleries as I could have, or working on newer big pieces, because I was working on illustrating and putting together a poetry book with a fellow artist, an Orlando artist, Paul the Poet. If you've ever been to Mathers, you probably know who I'm talking about. That's where his station is, where he gets to like write his poetry, and so people can come up to him and ask him for they give him a subject or a specific idea, and he will sit there in like 15 minutes or less. He will write you a whole poem, and it's, in his own unique style. When you hear him read his poetry, you'll understand what I mean. But it's good. A lot of people enjoy his custom poetry, and it's hand typed on a fancy old typewriter.
It definitely has a certain charm to it. Actually, Paulaidan and Paul the Poet came to one of my jobs to promote this book shortly before the pandemic happened and threw a wrench and everything. So keep an eye out for that. Again, to be determined on the release date, as a lot of things have come to a standstill at this moment.
Yeah, it all depends on when the factory reopens. But that tangent aside, my point was the way that I've adapted is trying to work with other artists, trying to create things that we can both, see go for a longer time than just one work of art. So while my priority is always work on something new, discover something new, try something new, I'm also trying to invest some of my time in collaborations so that my work can go beyond my own means of spreading it. So when I'm procrastinating, it can still be doing things like the taxi, like that book when it exists. When like doing a mural, I really miss doing murals. I would love a wall or two walls to paint some awesome things on. So if anybody out there has some walls that they want painted with awesome things, I cannot guarantee you what those awesome things will be, but I can guarantee you that they will be awesome.
So that actually begs the question, who do you create for? So, for example, when podcasting, they tell you to envision a person. It could be a made up person with a made up list of traits, but you don't have to, because I don't. But does your art do that? Do you create for anyone in particular? Is there anyone in mind that you see appreciating your art more than the general population?
I'd say that first and foremost, my art is always for me. That is why I started creating. It got me through some really hard times. It's always there when I cannot express myself in anything else. Even if my work isn't directly expressive, it gets what I need out onto the paper. In a lot of ways, I owe it my life. So my art is first and foremost for me, but I'd like to think that I show it to other people because it's also for the thinkers out there, the people that like to look deeper and like to think about things like conspiracies and about what's going on really here. And, this isn't what it seems. My art is never quite what it seems to be, and that's intentional. But I don't want to tell people what it is about. I really love people's imaginations, and I love giving them the tools to create their own narrative.
Your art, as we discussed a little bit before we started this interview, your art is not by any means still life. It is not a bowl of fruit. But if your art was inspired, and this is totally exemplary, this is just an example. If your art was inspired by a strawberry and I go in and I look at your art and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a banana. Does that bother you? Do you care how people interpret it, or do you want people to look at it a certain way?
I'm a bit of an absurdist. So, I love it more than anything when somebody can look at my art and tell me a meaning that they can fully flesh out and is completely different from mine. I'll give a really brief example. My first solo show a few years ago now, I think it was 2018, I produced a whole series on wood and on the walls of the gallery. And it was all supposed to be like a fake conspiracy theory where it was like lizard people have, been infiltrating our society since the beginning of time, because it's one of the oldest conspiracy theories, and I just thought it was so fun, such a fun concept. So I made prehistoric times with the lizard people and the lizard George Washington, the lizard Jesus, the lizard Buddha, and I made pieces that symbolized the current time, like a person's body filled with chaos and action and lizard people and secret societies. And then in the final room, I created this huge, I painted the whole wall, and it was all these black and white images and this character holding a tablet in front of it. And the tablet was supposed to be like a prophecy of the end of time. And the end of time was here because the black and white on the wall behind the tapestry was actually the present. So I had this whole elaborate story in this. It's the end of the world as we know it was what the show was called, and it was saying it was the end of the world. And my friend comes in and he looks at the whole thing. He looks at the whole thing. And he said, "I want to show you something." And he comes in and he brings me back to the beginning of the gallery in the same order of all the pieces that I just mentioned. He goes from one to the next, saying it's the story of how the world was created and how it was, the beginning of everything and the evolution of everything, and all this positivity. And I was like, I was blown away. I laughed so hard. I loved it. He came to a show called The End of the World and told me how it was the beginning. And that's the point, is like, even when I like had something that can guide somebody in one direction, they can still choose to look at it as satirical or ironic or just not necessary and make their own story. And I love that. I think people can make up better stories from my work than I ever could.
That's a fantastic answer. I really thoroughly enjoyed that answer. In the past, we've discussed absurdism, and I like to consider myself an absurdist as well. We've also discussed physics and things of that nature. And while it's kind of nice to think that the universe follows a certain set of rules, it's really fun to watch like scientists and physicists like scramble as like the rules of reality have changed yet again as they've discovered this particle or that rule or this. And it applies to real life too. It applies to, just the normal rules that we follow. You can't do this, you can't do that. Don't text them yet. Don't do this at this point. Like it's really interesting, and I enjoy pressing those boundaries when I can. So I guess that kind of leads into something that I have found, I guess something that I've observed in yourself as well as other artists, and there's a certain sense of universe building. I look at your art and I see a completely different world. Tell me about the world that you have created.
Well, like I said, I really don't like to give people too much about what I think my stuff means. I feel like I'd rather, point them in a direction and let them wander than guide them down the path by the hand. There are things that mean things to me in my work. I will say it like that. And so there are these lumps that have eyes. They're usually like half of an oval sticking out of things, and those are the trees. Now, there are real trees or realer looking trees in my work, and those are also trees. But my favorite are the lump trees that are more like hedges with an eye, because they're like the symbol of nature being more aware of us than we realize. Take that as what you will. I'm not going to get religious with it, but that the trees are aware of us, that that nature has a presence and has an awareness of us just as we are aware of it. So I think it's important to represent the trees. And actually, I think it's a fun way of playing it off, because the trees have eyes in my work, but the people do not. So take that for what you will. There's another cryptic hint. I also like to put a jagged line on the chest of my people sometimes, and that symbolizes a broken heart, because things happen and people get hurt and they have to continue to exist, and they exist in this world. So why wouldn't some people in my world be brokenhearted? I know I have been before. Let's see. There are also hands. I really like these. The Hamsa. It's a symbol that transcends its religious connections, mainly because it is a symbol seen in Islamic texts, in like Hindu texts, in Judaic texts, and also in the the pagan world. So it's like a universal, I would say, symbol of good fortune, of safe passage, of protection. So I put the Hamsa in my work, which is a hand with an eye. Now, I definitely take that to an artistic interpretation, and sometimes they're made into landscapes, and sometimes they don't have an eye. But I would say that that's like, a loving embrace to anybody looking at my art. It's like a hug. It's like wishing the world well and blessings on whoever is displaying my art, I guess, if that's not too conceited. But I also like to put in pyramids. They are a fun thing when I'm just, mindlessly creating a city of things. I love buildings and pyramids, and the buildings represent our modern society and the industrialization of our industries. But the pyramids represent conspiracy theories because there's always some people out there listening and thinking on like 17 layers deeper. I'm not going to say if that's too deep or not because, I mean, it could go 32 layers deep. We don't know.
Yeah, no, with conspiracy theories, it's like being on an elevator. You have to know, I mean, not that you have to, but it's just like, what floor am I getting off at? Like, how far down am I going? When is it too absurd? When is it, it's hard to know. There's definitely some dark stuff going on out there, to say the least, to put it lightly.
Well, it's so funny, like we like to think that we're the good guys, but everybody in human history has done something absolutely terrible, and the further we go back, the more atrocities are being committed. So I think that as humanity, we are progressing. It's just we're also in this age of information for the first time in the history of humanity, and so we can find out about all of it. And people are exposing things that should have been exposed when they happened years ago, and also exposing things that are happening today. And it's information overload. And it's not that this world is inherently violent or terrible, and it's not that people are inherently violent or terrible. It's just that we have all of this information at once, and we have to sift through it and look at it and try to decide what we think of it. And that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot.
But to take things in a lighter direction,
Yes.
why llamas? I noticed there's a lot of llamas in your work, and there are literally millions of animals. So what made you pick the llama?
Well, actually, that's a funny story, and I mean, some people may judge me on this, but there was a friend of mine that really liked llamas, and she commissioned me to do a piece of work. So I spent like a month drawing llamas in different ways, trying to figure out how to simplify the llama into a figure that could be, quote, a part of my universe, if you will, my version of a llama. And when I came out the other end, I had actually created some pieces that I really liked, including the one that I made for her. And I went super experimental, and it was really strange. And it had a face in the center that wasn't a llama. But she was creeped out by the face, so I actually had to, keep that piece and go back to the drawing board and work on it again. But that's where the llama was born, was doing that commission for her. And I did finish the second piece for her, but she couldn't afford it. So I kept it because I made two amazing pieces thanks to this person that requested a piece. So, I mean, joke's on them. They're still a fan and a friend. So I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. I just love the things that I created for you. And little did you know that I would fall in love with the llama in the process. I just, it was a really fun divergence from the human figures that I had been doing. And I like that I haven't seen it before anywhere else. I feel like it's more unique. And yeah, it's cute, and people love llamas. And I think llamas are pretty awesome. I mean, what was it? I think it all goes back to The Emperor's New Groove, right?
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of llamas, and to my understanding, they're quite sweet.
Oh, I actually I heard that it was like llamas spit, but alpacas are sweet. But
Oh yeah,
llamas are
maybe
still just as cute.
you might be right. I think alpacas might be the one with like
They
the
also,
sheepish personality, so to speak.
speaking of sheepishism, they also have softer fur, alpacas. But
So I've also heard.
alpaca is just not a it's not as catchy a word as llama. So I mean, if you want to think of my llamas as alpacas, I fully encourage you to do so, because alpacas are nicer. But llama rolls off the tongue.
Llamas definitely roll off the tongue, but back to that interpretation thing. Yeah, if you want to see it as an alpaca, you have full permission from the source himself.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about why llamas.
So, what do you see for yourself in the future? What do you see for your art? What direction do you see it going, or what goals do you maybe have for yourself and for your art from here on out?
Well, I'd really like to, if I had my way, I'd definitely like to go in the way of installation art, and I'd like to be doing more solo projects where I get to paint and build the environment in which the show happens. So, where I get to like build unique structures that would be a part of the thing, paint the walls and the floors of the gallery, and kind of bring people into the universe of the work. So I'm really looking forward to doing more immersive work, and I also would like to do more murals and travel with it. And I'm going to keep on making beautiful things, and I hope that other people enjoy them as much as I enjoy making them. And that's my dream. My dream would be that I get to show the beautiful things that I create to lots of people all around the world, and that they get to enjoy it just as much as I enjoy creating them.
That sounds pretty fucking awesome, actually. And from the installation standpoint, I think I'd be hard pressed to think of a better artist, honestly, who could create an entire universe for an installation to exist within. So I guess the final question I'll leave off with is one that I ask everyone. Just tell us a little bit about your personal philosophy or your overall view on life.
Hmm. I mean, it's a big question. Whatever I decide to do is the point of the time I wake up until the time I go to sleep. And it's up to me to choose to squander the day or to invest the day. And I can do something in between too. It's a fallacy that you can be only one or the other. I think you can be super lazy and super productive. It just depends on the day. I mean, my personal experience is so inconsistent. It's insane. And yet people think I'm somewhat consistent, which is impressive. I don't know how, but if my inconsistent is more consistent than some people's consistent, then that must mean that I'm not doing everything wrong. So I, I, I like to think that we can be both, that we can be the master of our universe, but also at the will of the universe. And I think the key is finding a balance.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and a pleasure as always to chat with you, Paulaidan.
A pleasure to chat with you as well, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
Well, I must say, from a journalistic standpoint, this may be my finest work thus far. Now, as my podcast enters the teens, I want to try something a little different. So, the first 5 people who share the post for this episode, I will buy them a llama sticker. You can go pick one out at Paulaidan's Instagram. The link will be on the post for that. And in case you were wondering where that would be, it's going to be Overheard Orlando Podcast on Instagram. You can also contact me at overheardorlandopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and stay true.